You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I'm going to start with college basketball. It is much more important to talk about the three big games that happened yesterday in college basketball than it is yesterday's NFL game that unfolded exactly how we all knew it would. I have to start with Creighton, Kansas. By far and away the best game that happened yesterday in any sport. Back and forth affair. Neither team could get a big lead. I don't think either team had a double-digit lead. Whenever Creighton got cooking a little bit, Kansas stormed back. Whenever Kansas got cooking a little bit, Creighton came storming back. And the end to this game was just perfect. With under 90 seconds left, Kansas is up 5. Denzel Mahoney hits a big 3 to pull the Blue Jays within 2. Then he steals the ball away from Bryce Thompson. Great active hands. Thompson fell victim to a really nice trap. It was a great setup by Greg McDermott. And then Mahoney easily tied the game up at 70. After that, though, Jalen Wilson hit the biggest shot of his career so far. Gave Kansas a 73-70 lead with 42 seconds left. Marcus Zagorowski of Creighton has the ball late. You want to talk about the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. Wilson, after hitting that big 3, fouls Zagorowski while he was shooting a 3. So if Zagorowski hit his free throws, we were going to overtime. He hit his first free throw. He hit his second free throw. His mom couldn't even watch. His mom was in the stands. I had a feeling Kansas was going to allow fans into this game. With all that pressure riding on him, Zagorowski bricked the last free throw. And that was it. Fantastic game. I told you both of these teams would have a chance of winning this game. I did pick Kansas, but I said it wouldn't surprise me if Creighton won. I went 4-0 yesterday in my picks. Just thought I'd throw that in there. This was a really solid effort by Creighton. If you're a Blue Jays fan, you have nothing to be upset about. Mahoney showed up. Zagorowski showed up. Damian Jefferson and Christian Bishop each scored 13 points. The thing that surprised me about this game was how little Antoine Jones and Ryan Kalkbrenner played. Jones only played 10 minutes. Kalkbrenner only played 9. I was praising those guys as being big weapons off the bench. McDermott chose not to use them as that. That was surprising. But other than that, everyone who you wanted to have show up, showed up. Mitch Valk was asked to shoot a lot of threes. He only had 2 of his 8 3-point tries. But at the end of the day, Valk is a microwave 3-point shooter. He's going to have games where he's on, and he's going to have games where he's off. That's what happens with every 3-point shooter. As for Kansas, what was incredibly surprising about this game was Ochai Agbaji no-showing. Agbaji missed all 6 of his shots. He finished the game with no points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists. Usually, I would say that if Agbaji doesn't show up, the Jayhawks aren't going to have much of a chance of winning. But give Jalen Wilson a ton of credit. He stepped up with a double-double. Christian Braun was really good. 4 for 9 from beyond the arc. He had 3 steals. He had 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists. David McCormick came out of nowhere to score 13 points in 27 minutes. The fact that the Jayhawks were able to win this game while their best player no-showed, and make no mistake about it, Agbaji is their best player. Bill Self would be the first person to tell you that. The fact that they were able to win that game with Agbaji no-showing is incredibly impressive. This is a really good Kansas team. It's a team that's going to go on a big run in March Madness. They have really skilled players, a fantastic coach. I don't have a favorite college team. Obviously, your favorite college team is the one that you have a personal connection to. None of these schools that I went to have D1 basketball teams. My father went to Vanderbilt, so depending on how I feel about him, I'll either root for the Commodores or against the Commodores. But in all seriousness, it's very easy for me to get behind Kansas. Not necessarily because of this specific group of players. I like them, but that's not why I'm getting behind them. They just have such a rich history. James Naismith, the father of basketball, was their first head coach. Their second coach was Phog Allen, one of the greatest coaches in the history of college basketball. The Kansas Jayhawks have been playing basketball since 1898. They have only had 8 head coaches. Naismith, Allen, William Hamilton, back to Allen, Dick Harp, Ted Owens, Larry Brown, Roy Williams, and Bill Self. That's it. 8 coaches in over 120 years. I respect the hell out of that history. They've only fired 1 head coach, Ted Owens. Larry Brown had the shortest tenure of any Jayhawks coach. He was there for 5 seasons. He left to go to the San Antonio Spurs. I think it's a safe bet to say that Kansas would have kept Brown around if he wanted to stay because he had just won a national title with Danny and the Miracles. I wouldn't call myself a Jayhawks fan. It's not like whenever I'm watching Kansas play, I'm saying Rock Chalk Jayhawk. But it's very easy for me to get behind Kansas because of their rich history. Even if you went to one of their rivals like Kansas State or Missouri, whatever, you have to respect that. Moving on now to UNC Iowa. And I didn't like this game. The reason why is because UNC kept it so close that I couldn't turn it off. Iowa had a bunch of opportunities to put their foot on the throat of the Tar Heels, but UNC kept hanging in there. I'll give them credit for that, but their perimeter defense was dreadful. That is why UNC lost. You cannot allow Jordan Bohannon, CJ Frederick, and Joe Weiskamp to be a combined 17 for 30 from beyond the arc. You are not going to win that way. All their attention was focused on Luka Garza. I understand why. Garza's one of the best players in the nation. Jimmy Dykes threw out an interesting comparison for Garza during the broadcast. He compared Garza to Tyler Hansborough. Not Tyler Hansborough in the NBA. Tyler Hansborough when he was at UNC. It's not a bad comparison. It's not a great one. I feel like Garza's better on the interior than Hansborough was in college. But it's not bad. I don't mind it. This isn't a bad UNC team. They put up 80 points. A lot of people in previewing this game said that the first team to get to 90 was going to win this game. Well, yeah. The final score was 93 to 80. I mean, I had a feeling it was going to be an offensive shootout, but I didn't want to say it definitively. I didn't know how Iowa would play against a really talented opponent like the Tar Heels. I mean, one thing is important to note. With like 10 minutes left to go in the second half, UNC had the lead. They just used up all their energy clawing back from that 12-point halftime deficit. After that, it was all Iowa. It wasn't a bad game for UNC. Garrison Brooks dropped 17. R.J. Davis had 12. Caleb Love had 11. The Tar Heels got some solid bench production. Day'Ron Sharp had 13 points. Andrew Plotek had 10. The guy who keeps underwhelming to me is Armando Bacot. In 22 minutes, the guy had 11 rebounds, which is good, I like that. But he also fouled out. He only had 4 points. You want him to be better. He has talent. There's no question. But he's having a tough time harnessing it. If you're Roy Williams, though, you've got to be happy with what your team did offensively, but you've got to work on their perimeter defense. Like I said, that's the seminal reason that they lost. Jordan Bohannon had 24 points. CJ Frederick had 21. Joe Weiskamp had 19. You limited Luka Garza. Good for you. 16 points and 14 rebounds. That's limiting him. He can go off for a lot more. He shot just 6 for 20 from the field. He had 4 blocks, which I liked. But he wasn't the Hawkeyes' best player yesterday. You'd be hard-pressed to say that any Hawkeye was singularly their best player. It was the prototypical team effort. We're not going to let Wieskamp take a shot. Okay, Bohannon will take it. We're not going to let Bohannon take a shot. All right, Wieskamp will take it. Those two guys can't take it. Frederick will take it. This was a fantastic win for Fran McCaffrey's squad. They are a force to be reckoned with. UNC, I'm not going crazy about them yet. The one thing I'll say is they're 3-2 right now. They were supposed to play Elon on Saturday. That game got postponed. The next game that they have scheduled at this very moment is their game 10 days from now against the Buckeyes. That's going to be a big test for UNC. That game can make or break their season. If you're UNC, you don't want to be 500 entering conference play. That's not going to end well for you. But I do have faith in this team that they'll figure it out. They have talented players. It's just going to take them a little bit to gel. Moving on now to Illinois Duke. What did I tell you? This is not a good Duke team. They don't play defense. They are dreadful offensively. They couldn't hit a 3 to save their lives. They couldn't hit a free throw to save their lives. Mike Krzyzewski has to work some magic quickly. The Blue Devils allowed 6 Illinois players to score at least 10 points. That's inexcusable. All you have to do is key in on Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Coburn, and you'd think you'd be okay, right? I'm sorry, but if you can't stop guys like Trent Frazier, DeMonte Williams, Andre Curbelo, and Georgi Bezhanishvili, you're not a good team. Those guys aren't fantastic. They're not bad. This is a good Illinois team. Brad Underwood has done a really good job this year. They played 5 games, I can say that. But they're not superstars. They're not going to be All-Americans. Illinois had their way with Duke all throughout this game. They were up 14-2 to start off the game. They were up 43-29 at the half. And after that, their lead never dipped into the single digits. Duke looked dead. This is not a good Duke team. Matthew Hurt isn't a bad player, but he can't be the best player on a team that's going to knock off a team like Illinois. Jalen Johnson, a big get for Coach K. The guy's from Milwaukee. Krzyzewski convinced him to go to Duke. He was invisible. He was 3 for 10 from the field. DJ Stewart was solid. But if Jordan Goldwire is going to shoot just 2 for 9 from the field, that's not going to end well for Duke. I did like the production that Jeremy Roach gave him coming off the bench. He had 13 points in 31 minutes. But the bottom line is, this is not a good Duke team this year. And then after the game, Coach K rips the NCAA for how they're dealing with the pandemic. Shut up. Alright, focus on your team. I understand you're Mike Krzyzewski. You're one of the greatest coaches in basketball history. That's college and pro. But don't deflect. Don't make excuses. Focus on why your team is so bad. They are dreadful defensively. They are dreadful from the perimeter. They can't hit free throws. I understand it's tough to bet against Coach K, but I'm going to give you the best piece of advice you're ever going to get in your life. Stop with the one and done stuff. Try to build this team with experienced players. You're trusting a lot of inexperienced players here. Guys like Johnson and Stewart, they're not ready for this. Is it possible they can get there? Look, it's going to be tough. After their game on Saturday against Charleston Southern, they start conference play. They're not going to run roughshod through the ACC. There are better teams in the ACC than Duke. UNC is better than them. Virginia's better than them. FSU is better than them. You can make the argument that Louisville and Virginia Tech are better than Duke. Will they make March Madness? Absolutely, but they're not going to be a threat when they get there. This is not a good Duke team. Mike Krzyzewski really needs to reevaluate things. It's just that simple. Speaking of the ACC, there was a huge upset yesterday. Now, I'm not talking about Duke losing to Illinois. I expected that. I'm talking about Virginia Tech getting their doors blown off by Penn State. They lost 75-55. This was a dreadful game for the Hokies. They couldn't put the ball in the ocean. They shot just 37% from the field, 27% from beyond the arc. They hit just half their free throws. Meanwhile, Penn State shot 50% from the field and 52% from beyond the arc. I understand that this is a good Penn State team. You can make the argument that they should be ranked, and they probably will be come Monday. Jim Ferry has gotten off to a really good start at Penn State. I liked him at Long Island University. He did a bad job at Duquesne. He's off to a good start at Penn State, I'll tell you that. They're not a bad team this year. They've got a good mix of starters and bench players. They're very experienced. Their average years of experience is 2.1. Usually, you're at 1. A bunch of their players came back to try to make something happen this year, and you were seeing the results of it. Isaiah Brockington had a really good game. He dropped 24 points. Myrion Jones had 14 points. Off the bench, Miles Dredd and Sam Sessoms each scored in the double digits. This isn't a bad Penn State team by any stretch. But Virginia Tech should have beaten them. They're usually better defensively than this. Realize they did a really good job defending Villanova to start off the season. Penn State just had their way with them. Keve Aluma, Naheem Lane, and Tyrese Radford are usually better than what we saw yesterday. Their high man was Jalen Cone, a guy who was playing in just his second game of the season. You don't want Cone being your leading scorer if you're Mike Young. And I like Young, by the way. He did a fantastic job at Wofford. I'm not going to go too crazy about this loss. This is Virginia Tech's first loss. And with their talent defensively, they'll be able to rebound. I think they'll be fine. But make no mistake about it, Penn State is the real deal. Alright, now I'll give you some NFL Valk talk. And there's really not much you can say about Cowboys-Ravens. I'd love to be able to give you more. But this game unfolded the way that you had to know it was going to. The Cowboys' offense wasn't dreadful. Andy Dalton looked good. Ezekiel Elliott looked solid. Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Dalton Schultz, and Amari Cooper all did their things. They're really good players. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean much if you don't have a defense. Leighton Vander Esch was getting turned around like crazy. The Cowboys linebackers looked lost. Wait a minute, we have to account for the quarterback to run it? He's going to run it up the middle? Of course he is. He's Lamar Jackson. Have you watched film? You can't allow Gus Edwards on 7 carries to have 101 rushing yards. The knock I saw on Jackson was that he didn't throw the ball a lot. He completed 12 of his 17 passes for just 107 yards, but he threw 2 touchdowns. I understand he also had an interception, but he had 13 carries for 94 yards. There's more than one way to skin a cat. At the end of the day, if the Ravens put up 34 points, you can't get upset at the quarterback. I like Lamar Jackson. I'll take him on my team in a heartbeat. Yes, his arm has taken a little bit of a step back. But he's still solid in that regard. Not great, but not terrible. And he more than makes up for it with his legs. The Ravens are fine with Lamar Jackson. The big thing with him is, can he win in the playoffs? Ultimately, time will tell. There is one other thing when it comes to this game that I have to talk about. Everyone was salivating over the fact that Dez Bryant was gonna go up against his old team yesterday. I didn't talk about it because I didn't know how much of an impact he'd have. Against the Steelers, people thought he was going to have a big role. He didn't have a catch. But regardless, people were looking forward to it. I was interested in seeing how it would unfold. But Bryant never got that opportunity. After he was warming up on the field, we found out right before kickoff, basically, that he had actually tested positive for the coronavirus. His first test was inconclusive. His second test was positive. After that, Bryant got really emotional. He said he was going to retire. He said a bunch of things on Twitter. He was ticked off. He was emotional. I wouldn't read too much into that. It's possible he could retire. But if he changes his mind, okay. That's emotional. You're preparing to go up against your old team. You want to go off against them. And then you find out later that you're not going to be given that opportunity. I don't blame Bryant for being upset for a second. But here's the thing. How was he allowed on the field? If the first test is inconclusive, you have to treat that as a positive. I thought that's what the NFL was doing. It's better to be safe than sorry. Like 5 minutes before kickoff, the NFL said, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Bryant didn't come into contact with any high-risk individuals. What? He was out there mingling. Sometimes he had his mask on, sometimes he had it half on. The NFL is making this stuff up as they go along. It's very possible that we hear about a COVID outbreak within the Cowboys and the Ravens again because of this. The NFL did a terrible job with this. Look, if they really got through this game without anyone else getting the coronavirus, wow. That's an incredible job by the league. But I think that's unlikely. This is an incredibly contagious disease. We're avoiding people who have it like they have leprosy. The reality is that game never should have happened. There's no way you can say with 100% confidence that Dez Bryant didn't infect anyone that was in that stadium yesterday. The other element to this is he never should have been allowed in the stadium. When that first test came back as inconclusive, you have to tell him to stay in his hotel room and then give him another test. If the only place he can get a test is the stadium, then he has to be escorted there with all eyes on him. You've got to keep as many people away from him as possible. Bad job by the league. If they really get through this without anyone else testing positive, okay, fair enough. But, again, I think that's unlikely. I'm not a doctor, though. Alright, now I'll give you some college football Valk talk. And the nightmare scenario has happened. There is a COVID outbreak within the University of Michigan's football team. Because of that, OSU can't play them. That means that they will fall one game short of qualifying for the Big Ten title game. Now, there are a bunch of things to break down here. Kirk Herbstreit is owed an apology. He got killed for saying that Michigan was going to cancel this game to screw over OSU. Well, in a sense, that's what ended up happening. I like Kirk Herbstreit. I didn't mind what he said. everyone owes him an apology. Some people are saying that the Big Ten should amend their rule, make it so you can miss a third game and still be eligible for a Big Ten title game berth. No. You are opening up Pandora's box there. That is a very slippery slope. Because then it's going to become a fourth game, and a fifth game, and a sixth game. You set these rules, you have to abide by them. One thing I wouldn't hate is the idea of letting OSU play a non-conference team. The Big Ten said that they're not going to play any non-conference games this year, and they've stuck to that. But other conferences have played non-conference games. I don't mind you amending that rule. Give OSU a chance to earn their way in. I don't know who their opponent would be. It's something that would need to be arranged very quickly. But I don't mind OSU being given another opponent. At the end of the day, if the Big Ten chooses to amend that rule or eliminate that rule, they're gifting OSU a Big Ten title berth. Indiana is going to scream bloody murder, and they'll be right. I understand that the reason this game isn't happening has nothing to do with OSU. So if you want to tell me they're being punished for something that was out of their control, you're looking at it really narrowly, though. You're right about Michigan, and you're right about Maryland, but you're wrong about Illinois. The Illinois game was canceled because OSU had a COVID outbreak. So if that game happened, this game being canceled is irrelevant. Some people were blaming the Big Ten commissioner or all the ADs, whatever the powers that be are, for not scheduling a season earlier. You could have given teams a little bit more of a cushion. You can make that argument, but at the end of the day, that doesn't change anything. I don't hate OSU. I'm not a Michigan fan. In fact, I kinda hate Jim Harbaugh for what he's done to that team. I loved that hire at the time. Now, I look like an idiot for supporting it. And holy moly, do I not want him on the Jets. There was a time in my life when I used to root for OSU. There was a time in my life when I wanted to go there. So don't call me an OSU hater for saying this. But unless they play a game on Saturday or Sunday, it can be against a schmageggy non-conference school. And OSU can destroy them 100-0. I don't care. But unless they get a game in, they don't deserve to be in the Big Ten title game. That game has to be Indiana versus Northwestern. Or it could be Iowa if they win on Saturday and Northwestern loses. These were the rules. Everyone knew the rules. You can't change the rules to benefit one school and screw another school over. If you're Indiana, how does that look? You want OSU playing in that game more than us? I understand that the conference needs to do what's best for the conference. And it is better if OSU plays than Indiana, if you're looking at it from the conference's end. But the reality is the conference shouldn't play favorites. That's the equivalent of the American League gifting the pennant to the Rays when they were up 3-0. It's okay, we'll move back the benchmarks for you. You've proven that you're the best team. Astros fans would scream bloody murder. Wait a minute, you're not going to give us a chance to come back? You don't remember what happened in 2004? Why can't we come back? Forget the fact that it's the Astros. Any team falling down 3-0 and then not being given a chance to rally and win 4 straight. People would be screaming bloody murder, and they'd be right. The conference cannot move the benchmarks back. Let OSU play another game. Find a terrible opponent for them. I don't mind that. Let them earn their way in. If you want to give teams an option to play one non-conference game this year, I don't mind that. That could happen in Week 16. No one would watch it, but still. Maybe some schools would do it. I don't know. OSU, though, they don't have the luxury of waiting until Week 16. This has to be sorted out now. You've got to find a school quickly that's willing to be the sacrificial lamb. With the money that OSU has, they could do it very quickly. There is one other thing, though. The CFP released their rankings yesterday. The top 6 stayed the same. But what happens if OSU doesn't play another game? Would they give OSU a CFP berth with just a 5-0 record? A bunch of schools would scream bloody murder. Cincinnati, A&M, Florida, Coastal Carolina. Whoever wins the Big Ten title game would scream bloody murder. The CFP committee has proven that they don't care about conference championships. Again, 2017. Alabama gets in despite not playing in the SEC title game. They go on to win the whole thing. This isn't an argument of should the CFP have more teams. I saw some people saying that. They should, but that's the straw man argument. Would OSU get in to the college football playoff despite only playing 5 games? I hope the answer is no. They don't deserve it. 6-0 is pushing it, but I could live with it. That's the minimum number of games that you have to win to get into a bowl game in a regular season, so I can live with it. 5-0, I'm going to have a tough time supporting that. I mean, I'll tell you, my top 4 would be Alabama, Notre Dame, Cincinnati, and Coastal Carolina. Let the undefeated mid-majors in. Give them a chance to show what they can do. I don't know what more you want from them. They're beating everyone that's put in front of them. Let them try to win a national title. Alright, now I'll give you some NHL Valk talk. And I'll start with the Flyers signing Philip Myers to a 3-year deal worth $2.55 million a year. That's $7.65 million total. In Myers' rookie season, in 18-19, he did not play well. only 2 points in 21 games. Then, his sophomore year, he took a big jump. Had 16 points in 50 games. He was a plus 17. Had a good playoffs. Had 4 points in 16 games. Scored a big overtime goal against the Islanders in Game 2 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. I like Myers. I think he has a ton of talent. This compensates him very fairly. It makes sense for both sides. Good move by the Flyers. Moving on now to an interesting trade rumor. According to Frank Saravalli of TSN, trade discussions about Max Pacioretty have been picking up steam recently. I understand that Max Pacioretty is due a bunch of money. $7 million, to be specific, over the next 3 seasons. And the Golden Knights are in cap hell. As it stands right now, they're actually over the cap. They're $1 million over the cap. But you can't trade Max Pacioretty. He's too good. You went all in this offseason. Re-signing Lehner. Bringing in Alex Pietrangelo. To trade Pacioretty? I don't want to say it negates all the good that you did this offseason, but it does lessen it. You are destined to lose that trade. Even though Pacioretty is on the older side of things, he's one of the older players on Vegas's roster. He's 32 years old. He could still play. He had 66 points last year in 71 games. Those 71 games led the NHL. He's been good in the playoffs for you. 19 points in 23 career playoff games for the Golden Knights. If I was George McPhee, I'd try to move Marc-Andre Fleury. I understand that's easier said than done because Fleury's on a massive contract. He's due $7 million for the next 2 years, but he's not your goalie of the future. Robin Lehner is. I wonder if a team like the Blackhawks would be interested in Fleury. Not to be a starter, but to help mentor guys like Colin Dahlia, Malcolm Subban, who Fleury played with in Vegas, and Kevin Lankinen. That's what I'd focus on if I was George McPhee, not trading Pacioretty. And you can sign a guy like Craig Anderson, Ryan Miller, or Jimmy Howard to be your backup. Like I said, that's what I'd do. Alright, now I'll give you some MLB Valk talk, not about James McCann. I want to wait until we get specifics on the contract, but it seems like he's going to sign a 4-year deal with the Mets. Like I said, not going to get into it now, but I will get into Carlos Santana signing a 2-year deal with the Royals for $17.5 million. And I gotta tell you, I don't mind this move for the Royals. I understand that when you first look at Santana's stats, they're dreadful. He played all 60 games last year for the Indians, but he hit just .199 with 8 home runs and 30 RBIs. but he's a guy who gets on base at a solid clip. He led the American League in walks last year with 47. The Royals really needed to beef up their offense this offseason. It's kind of weird. Usually rebuilding teams are deprived of pitching. They actually have some solid pitchers. Brady Singer, Danny Duffy, Brad Keller, and Chris Bubich are all fine. Their bullpen is solid too. Josh Stormont, Scott Barlow, Tyler Zuber, Kyle Zimmer, Jesse Hahn, they're fine with pitching. They just need to add offense. It wouldn't surprise me if Santana rebounded. In 2019, he did make the All-Star team. He had 281 with 34 homers and 93 RBIs. The Royals obviously know him well. They've gone up against him a lot. This can work out for the Royals. It's not going to vault them into the playoffs or anything, but it's a solid move. He'll help fill a big need for them. They did need a first baseman. Guys like Ryan O'Hearn and Hunter Dozier just aren't going to get the job done. This is a good move for the Royals. It's nice to see them spending some money. Moving on now to another sad death in the sports world. It's been happening too much recently. I don't like this. And that is the death of Ray Perkins, who died today at the age of 79 from heart disease. Ray Perkins is one of the most influential people in NFL history. Now, that may surprise you to hear, but the New England Patriots, for years, have run a variation of what's called the Erhardt-Perkins offensive system. Who do you think the Perkins is there? It's Ray. When Charlie Weiss was Notre Dame's head coach, he ran it. When Bill Cowher was the Steelers' head coach, he ran it. The irony is, in the NFL, Ray Perkins was not a great head coach. He started his head coaching career with the New York Giants. It was one of George Young's first moves as Giants GM. Perkins had made a name for himself as a very smart offensive mind. He was with the Patriots for a while as their wide receivers coach. In 78, he was the San Diego Chargers offensive coordinator. The Chargers that year finished with the 6th best offense in the NFL in terms of points per game. Young brought him in as head coach, and it didn't go well. Perkins struggled his first couple seasons. In 1981, the Giants went 9-7. They did make the playoffs. They won a playoff game. They beat the Eagles 27-21 in the wild card round, but they lost to the Niners 38-24 in the divisional round. The year after that was the strike year. The Giants went 4-5. And Young decided to fire Perkins so he could elevate Bill Parcells from Giants defensive coordinator to Giants head coach. Needless to say, that decision worked out pretty well. But it also benefited Perkins. Perkins went to the University of Alabama. He played under Bear Bryant. Perkins' last year with the Giants was Bear Bryant's last year with Alabama. Perkins took over for Bear Bryant at Alabama and actually did a pretty good job. While Alabama didn't win any national titles under Perkins, they did win 3 bowl games. In '83, they went 8-4 and beat SMU in the Sun Bowl 28-7. The year after that, they regressed. They went 5-6. Okay, that was a bad year. The year after that, 1985, Alabama went 9-2-1. Mike Shula had a really good year that year at quarterback. And Alabama beat USC in the Aloha Bowl 24-3. The year after that was Perkins' best year as a college head coach. Alabama went 10-3. Shula didn't have a great season, but that's okay because Bobby Humphrey, Alabama's running back, did. Cornelius Bennett was an All-American that year, and Alabama beat Washington in the Sun Bowl 28-6. So Perkins finished his Alabama career with a 32-15-1 record and was undefeated in bowl games. He went 3-0. That's pretty darn good. It's not Bear Bryant, but it's pretty darn good. Unfortunately for him, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers made him a big offer to go back to the NFL. Because they had such good luck with John McKay coming from the college ranks that they wanted to do it again. Perkins coached 4 seasons with the Buccaneers and was dreadful. He never had more than 5 wins in a season. He finished his head coaching career in 1992 with the Arkansas State Indians. He went 2-9. There were allegations that while Perkins was at Alabama, coaches and boosters paid players while they were recruiting. Those allegations have never been proven. Perkins' record is still intact. Perkins also wasn't a bad college player. In 1966, he was SEC Player of the Year and was a first-team All-American. He's a very important figure in the history of football. You may not know it, but all those years when Brady was playing with the Patriots, you were watching a Ray Perkins-type offense. His NFL record doesn't match his legacy. It's a damn shame. May he rest in peace. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that it isn't the high price of stars that's expensive. It's the high price of mediocrity.